a fish. This is in fact a fish, and here is the fish itself. This was the fish that was not even really discovered this past week, but finally characterized as a new species. And why that is again critical is because of conservation work. This apparently, it might be near you too. It might be near you too, Tatum, this fish. So apparently this had been known as a species of fish because of the Cherokee Native Americans. So because of the Cherokee, we've already actually known that this was a species of fish. So actually what's fun, Smikes, is that this fish had not been identified as a new species to Western science officially. However, Cherokee natives who had lived in this area of the Cherokee River and even the Ocmulgee River, which is where I grew up in. So our friend Tatum might have actually fished for this fish because this fish is a Sicklefin Redhorse, and it is in North Carolina and Georgia. And the Cherokee people have known this for a long time now. It has been formally described Oogie Dotley. And the reason it gets that name is it's actually a name that honors the Cherokee people. So I thought it was really cool. It kind of honors the original discoverers of the fish. It has actually been studied in an official capacity by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, but it had never been recognized as a true fish. And that's because the gentleman who was leading the original classification on it died. And when he died, no one picked up the mantle to actually demonstrate that yes, is in fact a real, new species of fish. And the reason that matters is because you cannot do any conservation efforts on an organism that is not recognized as a new species until you can actually prove that it is in fact a different species and it doesn't exist anywhere else. And weirdly enough, Corn, people were already trying reintroduction programs, like raising young species of these fish and re-releasing them in their native ecosystems, but they weren't getting any support from any official governing body because no one thought that it was in fact a real fish based on the legal definition of what species is. The Cherokee name is again the name that it got. The Oogie Dotley is a tribute to the Cherokee people who had already known all about this fish and were actually working with Western scientists in order to teach them about where their native ecosystem were. They had centuries worth of data from the Cherokee people, which I thought was really, really cool. So it was a really neat scientific study involving the Cherokee, Western scientists together, the original citizen science, what you'd say, of that land because they knew about it. Yeah. So Ratfinky, real fish as in the label of fish. So if you don't call it a new species, if you don't give it that genus species name that identifies that it's different from another fish, it is not considered by law a different kind of fish. It is just considered a generic fish. And so you cannot have legal protection for it as a species. So yeah, you cannot do any conservation efforts, Ratfinky, unless proven that this is I guess real isn't maybe necessarily the best word. Instead of real, think about it like its own unique species. It is fundamentally different from what you have in the existing literature up until now. So it was labeled as fish, just not a separate species. It didn't have an official genus species classification. And so now it does have the official genus species classification. And now they can officially try to take care of it and try to keep it from going extinct. Which again, I feel like is a little yikes that is so here's the thing though, Glued. Everyone already knew that this fish was endangered. They were already doing reintroduction programs to try to save this fish, right? And that's kind of the a real woof. That's a weird takeaway for it. They even exist in the Ocmulgee River. This is the river near which I grew up. It is in the great state hue of North Carolina and Georgia in the United States. And what's really cool, I think, is that Tatum may have seen these. Tatum has not fished for them, but he may have seen them. And here they are. So they do a mating swim, kind of like salmon will swim upstream. These also have go to different locations for breeding purposes. This is a case, so it is a case of overfishing, Smikes, and the thing is, it had been known to be overfished for a long time, and it was the native Cherokee people who were like, hey, this is a fish that's important in our heritage. We know how much there's supposed to be. There's an issue here. And the scientists were like, oh no, there's an issue here. Let us help. And actually this image here, we can take a look at them. It's actually quite nice in this paper. They did both male and female analysis. So the male is the upper one and the female is the lower one. There is a 3 millimeter difference between these two fish that were actually imaged, although they do get to be quite large in size as well. So yeah, it's a really neat story again of like native peoples working with the scientists, both of which knew that there was then something going on, except the only way to get protection for these species is to have it actually recognized as a species. But I also wanted to include how big these fish can get. And this is in Missouri. And Neil, they do have similar behavioral and reproduction pattern, as you were saying, to the salmon, where they will end up like going to a particular area, they lay the eggs, and then they end up dying there. And then the new ones, when they spawn, they go back down to the original site, grow up, and then go back to the egg laying site. At least that's what they're suspecting that this is happening based on the Cherokee accounts, which again is really cool. Like the Cherokee people have like an absurd amount of data on it because it's like they've been fishing them for hundreds of years, right? And so they're like, oh yeah, we exactly know the pattern and we know like the density of what there should be, and it's like, oh, it's really, really cool. With them spawning wombat, they people love fishing wombat. I can't remember if I think they let him go though. This is checking the record though size of this fish. So this I also wanted Tatum's take because I don't, this doesn't make, I don't know if Tatum knows a background about these river red horse type fish, if that's like a big size, but like that's the weight of like, newborn child right there. So it's kind of cool just to see like what the size range is. And Wheels, that wasn't the size that they were primarily finding for the study. So the study, they took a lot of different measurements, and it was not that large. It was like half the weight of that is what they were finding at the upper ends of it. Spark, yeah, this weighed more than Munchkin. Nope. So Smikes, it wasn't known as an endangered species. That was a catch, and that's why I thought it would be interesting to highlight this video. So this video is 7 years ago, and the fish is not officially recognized as an endangered species because it wasn't recognized as its own species. It was just thought of as fish, which will probably be a whole lot less now that it's officially recognized. And so I did mention y'all that there have been conservation efforts to restock the rivers as well of this particular kind of fish. Again, they're primarily found in North Carolina and Georgia, but they get all the way out to Missouri as well. And I think like South Carolina, they'll be end up seeing as well, basically along that southeast. But they've been trying to restock the tributaries and the rivers as well with this particular fish. So they farm them, they'll grow them up, and then they release them out into the water supply to kind of further boost back the fish population. And this is a video from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife that kind of goes over what exactly their methodologies were. There they are right here. The image that I showed y'all at the beginning of the stream of like what is the new animal of the week, that is actually going to be, I think it was maybe Miss Art Rules who mentioned, but that is going to be the mandibles. So there are like teeth in the mouth of this creature. But yeah, it was cool. Again, like this guy's going over the history of this fish too, about it being lost to science and then eventually being refound. And they were collaborating with, he said, local experts. Those were the Cherokee people. But here again is the catch. They had to decide on their own to be involved and care about the survival of this fish, not because of any legal obligation. So up until this week, that it's actually recognized as a new species, there can be nothing legally done to protect it. But now that it has that official label, it can be protected. There's these are live specimens of the male and female. This is a preserved specimen of a female. And then here we go. These are the teeth. So these are of the same species from different zones, A and B. C is of an existing one. So C is an existing species. But yeah, so Spartacus, this is the mandible structure. A and B are the mandible structures of the new species of fish. C is of a related one. Same in that same family of fish. But they did a fair bit of like analysis, and even they honored the original author. So this is the gentleman that died, and they actually even like write out in the methods paper like, here is all that he had done so far to be able to tell us like and what we had learned there. Here's just some of the descriptions on where they were found. So actually this is really cool. So this here, Sparky Pugwash, this entire paragraph, look at that, Sparky, all that data is on the fish from the Carolinas, and that isn't from the scientists, like the official scientists, Sparky. That is from the Cherokee people and their records of when and where they had seen the fish. And then the same thing goes, there's a couple in Tennessee. Here's further categorization. Swain County. So like all of this data on where they're located were from the native people. And that's, again, I thought was really cool of how they work with them. They have, even a section, coloration on life, how they looked. Yeah, they have like whole sections on ecology of how their behavior works. But here's some drawings as well of what they look like, of how the teeth are located here. You see that? So how the teeth are located, just like with the other image that they've taken. Here are the really young ones. So these were actually propagated in a breeding zone. So Tatum, these are 45 to 60 millimeters in length, and just like a really like from that breeding facility. So like brand new on there. Yeah. And then here's some of the distribution of where they did all the analysis. So you got Georgia, North Carolina, a little bit of South Carolina. They found some in Tennessee, and then there's some further down south as well. But this was the primary zone of like where all the data had been coming from. So Tatum, because the Cherokee people were in this zone, that's where they were able to get information, and again, the data on where everything is from and should be from, and what the expectation is of, again, where they're coming from. But really nice to see the map. They even had Tatum, because it was a 20-year worth of studies, right? I've never seen this kind of graph in a new species of the week. But Tatum, check this out. Age of fish on the x-axis at the bottom, and then the size for both male and female. So they aged fish for 20 years, Tatum. How do you... So Smikes, these were grown because they've had facilities where they're growing them up for release, that they were able to monitor them over the course of time. So it wasn't that they went in and actually did any kind of aging here. They actually went and had them in a facility. But yeah, as Tatum mentioned, like if you were to catch them at their really, really young stage, and we're at a stage where you know their age, and then tag them and release them, you'd be able to track them too. But here it was tracking over the course of time in a contained facility. And they were actually able to get, okay, based on this data, here's the size that the animal will be. Again, there's going to be outliers like that mega one that they caught in Missouri. But it's just really neat to see that like there's this variance that exists that you can account for. Like I haven't in our new papers of the week seen this level, but also this represents 20 years worth of work, and that much work probably isn't going to be put into any kind of paper for most of the time for new species of the week. Like they're just going to do a smidge of sequencing. They might take some photos and they might just move on. There's not going to be this like really neat resolution of data. I think the other thing too is, Tatum, because the local people valued this knowledge, they did a lot of measurements just on their own over time. They even had here, we had a question about the dorsal fin. So I forget who said the dorsal fin, but this is the dorsal fin of the new species. The length is on the bottom, the standard length, and then the dorsal fin height is on the top. And so the new species is like much larger. So they didn't have any hypothesis as to why it is, but I forget who it was, if it was Neil from the chat, who pointed out that there are those longer, or maybe it was Wombat, the dorsal fin is a very different shape in terms of size. Like even they noticed it. So like that's like a really nice takeaway. It's like, oh yeah, it seems like others are noticing this as well. Let's do this, a measurement on this. And so yeah, they had a bunch of metrics for these. They had a small amount of sequencing, but it's just that mitochondrial region to show that it's under selective pressure and it's changing a fair bit. And there it is for this paper. This video, y'all, just to give you some context, is 12 years old, as they're trying to demonstrate that these fish were already known, again, by the local people, as well as the scientists, that, hey, there was something wrong with these fish in terms of the numbers. We should try to do something to take care of them. They are, in fact, endangered still, Smikes. They are, in fact, still endangered. They are not under levels of, like, the level of protection that they need is full on endangered. Yeah. So even with this restocking that they were trying to do, that restocking was not fully successful because there was still no law protecting them. And now that there is this classification that they exist as their own species, the hope is that there will be protections in place to keep them alive as well. Call of New Species. So Ella, the publication work was stopped. So the guy that was leading the charge on doing the publication, he died. And while there were others involved in attempting to keep them like preserved, they were just primarily volunteers. And so it wasn't like their day job to be writing up the scientific paper or doing the kind of like data analysis the guy had been doing. So they this person, I forget now who it was, but they took over and kind of pulled it to the over the line to the end to kind of really like, all right, we need to finish this. Let's go ahead. And part of that actually was driven by the fact they were unable, Ella, they were unable to get this animal off. Like, they were able to do surveys, right? So they knew about rough numbers of how many there are, but they were unable to get it off that endangered level. Like, it was, and to move it just to threatened or totally safe. And so, like, all right, we need the law on our side. Let's get that paper out. They were able to incorporate the data. Ella, they even have in some of the paragraphs references to the original person, like by name. Like, this gentleman, he had found this particular thing, and see figure so and so, and then we further looked at it because there was a gap in time, right? So that was kind of the difficulty in writing the paper, I feel, is because it wasn't just that the guy was working on it, died, and the following week someone picked up on it. It was I think like a decade plus gap in terms of picking up the paper and taking it over that finish line. And so you had to almost recollect some of the data, because some of the data of like raw numbers of like what's in the waters might not have been accurate. So that's another reason why they had this big time span for the paper of being able to track like this amount of time through 20 plus years, is because they had the older gentleman working on it. They had the gap, and then they needed to collect some more data on it. It's neat, not necessarily for a good reason, but it's still neat in terms of how it was collected. The pre-listing, Ella, is the attempt at getting some legalese out there, but it's not a guarantee, and it's just something that they needed to be, working really hard to be able to get around against some of the laws and get the law on the side that there needs to be this level of protection with them, where otherwise they're not able to get on it. So I think it's as interesting. It's really interesting for a couple of different reasons. One is just how the system fundamentally works, and the other amount of protection is just, or interest is just like, well, it's like that from the local people having the information, a decade's worth of work that kind of further solidify, yes, this is in fact something new. And I hope you all enjoyed story number 1.